As you know, Bill Cosby has been sentenced to do 3 to 10 years in state prison and was sent into custody immediately by the judge because the judge said that Cosby could, and I quote, quite possibly be a danger to the community. Now, I'm not making this video to argue the case about his guilt or innocence. I believe some of the women had been legitimately drugged and raped, but I also believe that some of it was consensual. And those who had consensual sex with Bill thought that they could seize upon a financial opportunity, so to speak. You know, maybe they can get some money because of some of the legitimate allegations that came out against him. But the most puzzling about this case is some of these rape allegations go back as far as the 60s, during the height of the civil rights era. Even though Bill was a well-known person in the 60s, you know, he was the first black man to star in a primetime TV show, I Spy. So yeah, he was well known, but he was still black. He was a black man in the 60s. He started acting in the early mid-60s. Jim Crow laws ended in 64. Voting Rights Act in 65 got started. Black folks still fighting for equal rights up until now. But this black man raped white women in the 60s and got away with it. For over 50 years, he got away with it. And allegedly, he just kept raping white women in the 70s as well. You know, black folks, they had it a little bit better in the 70s, and I mean a tad bit better in the 70s. But old Bill, he's still raping white women in the 70s. And then in the 80s, black folks had it a little bit better than the 70s. And old Bill, he's still raping and drugging white women in the 80s. Emmett Till allegedly whistled at a white woman in 1955 at the age of 14. He whistled at a white woman, 14 years old. Never touched her. He just allegedly whistled at a white woman. He was beaten so bad. His body was so disfigured that it was unrecognizable. Lots of blacks and white civil rights activists were murdered by racist white people. Yet they couldn't get to Bill. So none of these women that Bill Cosby allegedly raped during the 60s, none of these women had family members. They didn't have brothers, fathers, uncles who could come to their rescue and at least tell the racist white police that a black man had raped their white relative. You know, a lot of those white guys, they wouldn't have went to the police. They would have handled it themselves. They would have either hung Bill Cosby or they would have shot him, or something very heinous would have happened to Bill. But you mean none of these women went to any white male and said, that guy raped me, that black man raped me. They were all afraid that Bill Cosby, this black actor in the 60s, was so powerful that they just had to hide their shame for 50 years. Hell, Bill Cosby could have been followed and wiretapped and just set up to be murdered by the government because they were doing those things to black leaders during that time. And after he would be murdered by the government, of course, then, you know, they would have come up with some lame story about how he died, and we never would have known the real story behind the death of Bill Cosby. Had these white women come forward during the 60s and 70s and 80s, a black man getting away with raping dozens of white women because they were scared of how powerful the black man was in the 60s. You know who else was powerful in the 60s? President John F. Kennedy. President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 because a lot of white supremacists didn't like what he was doing for black folks and Latinos. And a lot of folks believe that JFK died because of the part he played during the civil rights movement. As a matter of fact, he proposed legislation that became the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So a lot of whites weren't so happy about JFK. A lot of whites in his administration, a lot of whites in law enforcement, a lot of whites in government across the country didn't like what JFK was doing. So they had him set up to be murdered. But old Bill, he's still drugging him up and dicking him down, right? I just find the fact that he got away with this for 40, 50 years as a black man in America. I don't know about the NBC deal. I don't know about any other conspiracy theories that maybe he was trying to purchase NBC. I don't know about any of those things. So I'm not going to comment on that. I'm not going to say whether I think he's innocent or guilty because I really haven't put a lot of thought into it and I absolutely don't know what happened. But I will say that there's plenty of room for reasonable doubt. The judge that handed down the sentencing was definitely aiming to give Bill Cosby some jail time. I mean, this is the Me Too era. You can't be a judge in the Me Too era presiding over one of the biggest sexual assault cases in history and not give Bill Cosby some prison time. You can't be in that position and not give Cosby some prison time. It just won't go well with your career. It also helps to know that Judge Stephen O'Neill's wife, her job is working with sexual assault victims. So on one hand, this judge had the world watching to see if he was going to lay the hammer down on Bill Cosby. But also, will he be able to go home in peace because he'll have to hear from his wife as long as they're married? Okay, so after saying all that, what does this case have to do with O.J. Simpson? Well, to some in the white community and the white media, it's the O.J. trial all over again. I mean, it's not the same racial divide as the O.J. trial. Not quite the exact same energy, but there was some racial undertones when it came to the Cosby trial. It's just not as intense as it was with the O.J. trial because there are a lot of white famous people who are in the spotlight for doing the same thing, as well as news about Donald Trump and his administration every single day. The energy is just not the same as with the O.J. trial. I mean, during the O.J. trial, that was the story of the time. But it still feels like a modern day O.J. trial. White female victims, black male victimizer. Only this time, they got him. They got him. So from now on, every famous black male that victimizes a white female, it's going to be the O.J. trial all over again. So little by little, they're taking down O.J. That's just my opinion. But thanks for taking the time out of your day to hear me ramble about this. Till next time, peace.